From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
With a potential government shutdown on the horizon, dreamers went to the nation's capital to speak out on immigration reform.
Arizona is one of 2 states in the country that do not have legislation against texting and driving, but that could change after a new bill proposal.
And Howling for Change will take you inside the latest efforts from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to save the Mexican gray wolves.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Troy Lynch.
And I'm Adriana de Alba. Thanks for joining us. It's a major step to avoid a government shutdown, but a Senate compromise announced today makes no mention of DACA or immigration reform. The Senate reached a bipartisan budget deal funding the military and social programs. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the White House are calling it a win, but House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says she won't vote yes in her chamber until dreamers are protected too.
I think that plenty of Republicans are on board to help our dreamers. Give us a vote, Mr. Speaker. Give us a chance. Treat this House with the dignity it deserves so that we can represent the people and the wishes of our country.
Pelosi's words were a catalyst for action for those participating in Dreamer Day on Capitol Hill. Ariana Bustos is live at our Washington bureau with the latest. Ariana?
Pelosi's message was a rallying cry for those gathered at a church here for the National Day of Action for a Clean Dream Act. Arizona Dream Coalition Executive Director Karina Ruiz, a DACA recipient herself, says her group won't stop fighting.
Politicians and Congress are talking about immigration, not because they want to do it, but because immigrant youth have been reclaiming our space in Congress. We've been taking over offices. We've done sittings. I got arrested. I put my body in the line in December. We're going to do whatever it takes.
Political activist Linda Sarsour says she's demanding that Congress pass a Clean Dream Act, even if it means a government shutdown.
For those of you who are government workers, who have to feed their families, I'm with you, I understand. But sometimes we gotta make sacrifices for the things that we believe in.
Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota says he won't vote for anything but a Clean Dream Act. Ellison credits activists like those here today who urge Congress to make change.
It's really not about no politicians, including me. It really is about the pressure you all have brought to this moment. And it is that pressure that is making everybody have to act.
Reese says she's hopeful for a better future and calls for youth to continue to rally and not stop now.
For people in Arizona, for DACA recipients, immigrant youth and their families, I want to call on them to not lose hope. I know that it can be frustrating, that people might think that we depend on Congress all the time, but I want them to join organizations like ours. I want them to join the movement.
The rally has wrapped up, but Pelosi, who began speaking shortly after 8 a.m. Phoenix time, is still going. Live in Washington, Ariana Bustos, Cronkite News.
President Trump has requested a military parade to show appreciation for men and women who risked their lives to keep our country safe. Trump's desire for a military parade branches from Bastille Day, which he attended last summer in Paris. But this can cost millions of dollars. The plans for the parade include shipping tanks and military hardware. Military officials are unsure how they're going to pay for these expenses. The Pentagon is looking over possible dates to hold the celebration.
It was 2 months ago today that Arizona Representative Trent Franks left Congress in the face of a harassment probe. Yesterday, the House gave final approval to policies aimed at protecting congressional workers from sexual harassment. Cronkite News reporter Austin Bundy has details from our Washington bureau.
The bills, called the Me Too Congress Act by some, are aimed at creating a no-tolerance atmosphere towards sexual harassment on Capitol Hill and elsewhere, said California Representative Jackie Speer.
It's also a victory for the American public. And we are sending a clear message to them and to everyone who is employed across this country.
The bipartisan legislation follows a rash of harassment cases in Congress, resulting in the resignations of Senator Al Franken, Representatives John Conyers, and Trent Franks, and forcing several others not to seek re-election. The bills require that every congressional office adopt an anti-harassment policy and creates an Office of Employee Advocacy to provide legal help for workers who say they have been harassed. The policy would also make lawmakers here reimburse the U.S. Treasury for any harassment settlements paid out on their behalf, drawing praise from one of its co-sponsors, Arizona Representative Kyrsten Sinema, who said, "Arizonans' tax dollars shouldn't be used to cover up bad behavior. Today, we worked across the aisle to hold members of Congress personally accountable for any sexual harassment settlement." Spears says the policy will succeed by giving the victims the help and attention they deserve.
The victim will have support. The victim will have legal representation. The victim will be in charge.
Reporting from Washington, Austin Bundy, Cronkite News.
The Senate Transportation and Technology Committee passed a bill that would ban using wireless devices while drivers are operating a motor vehicle. Reporter Emily Richardson explains why the 11th try may be the charm.
In 2013, Brendan Lyons' firefighting career was ended when he and his fiancée were on a bike ride and got hit from behind by a distracted driver.
My own agency responded on that scene. I was told in the very beginning they didn't even recognize me, but at a brief moment they were stunned, realizing that they were treating one of their own.
Almost 5 years later, Arizona still does not have a statewide law banning cell phone usage while driving. Lyons attended the SB 1261 committee hearing yesterday to share his story and hopes that Arizona becomes the 48th state to ban texting while driving. He was joined by Jonathan Hall, whose dad was killed by a woman who was on her phone while driving on the freeway.
My dad was my hero, and losing him just is terrible. And it's still terrible. This has been almost 2 years and I'm still doing this because something has got to change.
State Senator Steve Farley first introduced a texting while driving ban 11 years ago and thinks this is the year it will finally pass.
This year provides a great opportunity. I think there's a whole different spirit here in the legislature where we can put any of those old history things aside and just legislate common sense.
If passed, SB 1261 would make it a petty crime for drivers to read, write, or send electronic messages while behind the wheel.
Hall is optimistic that the bill will become a law and save lives.
Down the road, someone else is going to suffer this, and maybe this law would prevent that.
In Phoenix, Emily Richardson, Cronkite News.
Farley modeled this year's texting and driving bill after the one that was recently passed in Texas. The bill was passed on by the Transportation and Technology Committee, but still has to pass through the Rules Committee and caucus before it can go through the Senate floor.
Moms Demand Action, a national group focused on advocating for responsible gun ownership in the U.S., gathered at the Arizona Capitol today. Volunteers from across the state met with legislators to raise awareness about safe gun laws. The group sought support for 2 bills passing through both the House and Senate that focus on prohibiting access to firearms for those convicted of domestic violence crimes.
In Arizona, the death rate by guns in domestic violence situations is 45% higher than the rest of the nation. And so there is absolutely something we can do about it.
The 2 bills, HB 2299 and SB 1224, have been assigned committees but have not yet been put on the agenda.
A recent review of student fees found some areas where Arizona universities can improve. The Board of Regents spoke about a state audit today ahead of the meeting planned tomorrow. While they say that the report was positive, it did identify some policies that don't meet national best practices. The Vice President for Business Management and Financial Affairs, John Arnold, says tomorrow they will be making a blanket statement asserting that any fees that don't fit into mandatory fees, program fees, class fees, or user fees must come to the board.
I think that will really give some additional transparency to students, of how this fee fits in with the rest of the fee structure that they might be involved in.
Arnold mentions that some adjustments from the audit will take time over the following months, but they want to handle as much as possible before March when they start setting university tuition for the following school year.
Some Phoenix residents filed a lawsuit against the FAA for changing the paths of planes at Sky Harbor.
Now they're meeting face-to-face with the feds. Coming up on Cronkite News, how some community meetings aim to smooth out the turbulence over flight paths.
Plus, Environmental Day at the Arizona Capitol has advocates talking about clean air and clean water for our state.
Managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. The journalists of tomorrow face a fast-changing media landscape, but quality news remains vitally important to our communities, our country, and our world. At ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, students learn solid, reliable reporting, holding the powerful accountable, and rebuilding the public's trust. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, preparing the next generation for a stronger future of journalism.
As journalists at Cronkite News, we report on stories that matter to you by focusing on the local impact. We dig deeper and work tirelessly to keep you informed.
Live in Wickerburg.
Live in Los Angeles.
In Cleveland. In Washington. In Louisville.
From Jerusalem.
Live in Philadelphia. From around the world to right here in Phoenix.
At Cronkite News, we report the facts and stick to the truth.
Airport noise that disrupted historic neighborhoods near downtown Phoenix may soon quiet down. The first of 3 public meetings between neighbors and the FAA over flight paths was held last night. Madison Miller reports an end is in sight.
We are very encouraged and we're very pleased that our voices were heard and they understood how disturbing it really was.
There was a packed house at the Maryville High School last night at the FAA's open house about the new flight paths at Sky Harbor Airport. The neighbors won a lawsuit filed against the FAA for changing the path of planes flying out of the airport without notifying residents first.
In co-hosting these workshops with the city was just to have as many people come out as possible so that as many people as possible are aware of the changes that we're proposing to make.
Looking positive from what I've seen around here today. It's got a lot of work gone into it.
Larry Mack, a 10-year resident in the Encanto Manor neighborhood, says he's hopeful for the future of his home and soon will be enjoying his time outdoors once again, now that the flight paths will return to what they were in 2014.
That would sure be nice. That would sure be nice and appreciated because it'd be about 4 years into it then. So yeah, I think that's time.
In Phoenix, Madison Miller, Cronkite News.
New information on flight path changes can be found on the Sky Harbor website. 2 more open houses scheduled for tonight at 5 at Cesar Chavez High School in Laveen and tomorrow night at 5 at Horizon High School in Scottsdale.
Groups from across Arizona traveled to the state capitol to push environmental legislation. More than 20 organizations, including 6 high schools from across the state, supported several bills that would keep Arizona's water and air clean. Event organizers encouraged participants to talk to lawmakers about some of the bills. The group supported bills that would dedicate unallocated water to maintaining Arizona's ecosystems. However, they opposed several of the state's water program amendments. They say some of these amendments would reduce groundwater supplies for the state.
The other message that we want to send is like, you know, this is our government, this is our legislature. They work for the people of Arizona, and so make your voice heard.
The groups had meetings set up with officials to give input on at least 8 different bills relating to environmental justice and sustainability. Environmentalists have been working for years to revive the population of the Mexican gray wolf in Arizona.
But new federal changes may threaten the recovery effort. Coming up on Cronkite News, we'll take you into the wild, where experts are documenting the wolf packs and bracing for what's next.
Rain is expected to come next week. Find out when coming up on Cronkite News.
I'm Ted Simons, host and managing editor of Arizona Horizon. Join us each weekday at 5:30 and 10 as we bring you the top newsmakers who impact the state. We cover the stories in depth that shape and affect our local communities, and we take the time to ensure that all voices are equally heard. For more than 30 years, Arizona Horizon has been your voice and your source for what matters most, right here on Arizona PBS.
By the year 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Before Professor Halden, I had an insane amount of passion, but I almost felt helpless because I didn't know how to use it. Professor Halden gave me a chance to make a difference. Being at a place like ASU allows you to take these big leaps. Ultimately, the biggest problems in the world cannot be solved alone.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does an annual count of the Mexican gray wolf population as part of a recovery plan to sustain its numbers. Last fall, the Trump administration made a revision to that plan, sparking opposition from a coalition of wolf advocates. As part of our Access Across Arizona initiative, I traveled to Apache County, near Alpine, and even into western New Mexico to learn all about the wolf recovery plan. It's a busy afternoon in the mountains of New Mexico, where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service pursues a female Mexican gray wolf. Today, she's captured. Her radioactive collar will be replaced, so she and her family lineage can continue to be tracked.
We need the data so that we can make better decisions going forward for wolf recovery, but so that we can also make better decisions about wolf impacts on humans and livestock and things like that in the environment.
The count is a complicated mission. Helicopters track the wolves from above using darts to capture them. They take the wolf to a remote processing station where it's measured, treated, vaccinated, and given a working collar. The final step is to safely release the wolf back to its territory, where it reunites with its pack. John Oakleaf has coordinated the wolf count for more than a decade and contributed to writing a revision to the recovery plan.
You've seen some growth in the population, and it's a heck of a recovery. Anytime you go from 0 animals in the wild to a population of over 100, that's something that's pretty significant.
At last count, there were 113 Mexican wolves in Arizona and New Mexico, but the recovery plan has taken a twist. The Trump administration finalized a revision to the Mexican gray wolf recovery plan in November of last year. Now, a coalition of wolf advocates is challenging that plan with a lawsuit. During and after our visit, we continued to press the Fish and Wildlife Service to comment on camera about the lawsuit. They declined, instead responding with a statement saying, quote, "The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does not comment on pending litigation," end quote. The lawsuit claims the revised plan fails to provide recovery for the species and that it ignores current problems the population faces.
It doesn't deal with illegal killings, which is the biggest source of wolf mortality. It ignores suitable habitat in the United States and relies on habitat in Mexico, which is inadequate for the wolves. It sets population goals that have a high likelihood that the Mexican gray wolf will end up right back on the endangered species list.
Under the revision, the Mexican gray wolf would be removed from the endangered species list in 8 years if and when the population reaches an average of 320 in the U.S. and 200 in Mexico. Absent from the plan is introducing the wolf population into the Grand Canyon regions of Arizona, Colorado, and Utah. An expansion a Blue Ribbon Task Force of top scientists has deemed necessary for the population to survive.
Mexican gray wolves are the engine of evolution for southwestern ecosystems. The recovery plan really needs to be replaced with one that's based on science so that the wolves themselves can help balance the ecosystem and be part of the natural world forever.
The Trump administration and the Fish and Wildlife Service have yet to respond to the lawsuit. For more multimedia coverage on the Mexican gray wolves, check out our online report at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
The weather's been great all across the state, but there are signs of raindrops this weekend. Atlin Hassard is tracking our forecast. Atlin, is it really supposed to rain this weekend?
It's coming up on rain next week, Troy, and we'll get into that soon. This afternoon, we hit our high of 80 degrees, unseasonably warmer temperatures than we're used to this time of year. Our average is 71 degrees, not as bad, though, as that 88-degree high from 1963. Tonight, we're expecting clear skies and a chilly low of 50 degrees. Make sure to bring a jacket if you go outside. Tomorrow's high, 82 degrees. We're keeping with those sunny skies. Eastbound winds coming 5 to 10 miles an hour. A look at our highs across the state tomorrow. We're going to go hotter temperatures as we move north to south. 60 degrees in the Grand Canyon, 82 degrees down in Tucson as well as Phoenix, and then 83 degrees in Yuma is our high point. Coming up on this weekend, let's take a look. Those 80-degree highs are continuing and those 50-degree lows continuing as well, but we're going to take a dip and we're going to get into the low 70s with our highs next week. And look at that. There's that rain. It's on Monday, 77 degrees that day with a 53-degree low. I'm Atlin Hassard for Cronkite Weather.
Thanks so much, Atlin. We'll be sure to wear jackets on Monday. I mean, if you've been driving around the valley, chances are you've seen bright yellow bikes on the side of the road.
Coming up on Cronkite News, why some are now complaining that these rentals are turning into roadblocks.
Cronkite News weeknights at 5 on Arizona PBS.
Fridays, it's at Cronkite News, your social sharing connection where you choose the news. Facebook likes and shares, tweets, retweets, and favorites. YouTube views and subscriptions. We're watching you watch us. From our digital home at cronkitenews.azpbs.org to your television, web browser, or mobile device. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Then join us for At Cronkite News, our weekly refresh, each Friday at 5 on Arizona PBS.
Many cities now have bike share programs, but one type is causing problems for neighbors and businesses. As Cronkite News reporter Mari Nelson shows us, riders are abandoning their bikes in the wrong places.
These brightly colored bikes have been popping up all over the valley for anybody to use and ride to any location.
We just started seeing them on the streets all of a sudden.
and then they just like are everywhere now.
But people are complaining that some cyclists are littering the streets by dropping bikes in the middle of sidewalks and front yards.
People can just like leave them on the street and they're not even worried about it.
We put the bikes in the right places, but one of the beautiful things about dockless bike share is you can kind of pick it up wherever you want and leave it wherever you're going.
Paul Vidal is the Phoenix general manager of the company OFO that owns these yellow, dockless bikes. Scottsdale Transportation Director Paul Basha says residents have complained that bikes are being left where they shouldn't be.
Leaving somebody's private personal property on somebody else's private property is illegal and shouldn't happen. If a bicycle is blocking a sidewalk, that's illegal as well.
Vidal says they place the bikes so that people in wheelchairs or strollers can pass, and he expects his customers to do the same. But Basha says that some riders aren't, and they aren't being held accountable.
It is the business's responsibility.
It's our job to correct that immediately, address complaints when people report them in there, and just find them on our own and move them around.
In Phoenix, Mari Nelson, Cronkite News.
People who find the bikes in their yards or sidewalks can't move them without the bike being unlocked through an app, but they can call the bike company to have it removed.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, it's our weekly update with state lawmakers on the latest at the legislature. And we'll learn about an online resource that comes to the rescue of firefighters. It's the next Arizona Horizon.
I'm John Yang. On the next NewsHour, a crime wave in Germany that's being blamed on immigrants. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.